Perhaps everything that needs to be said has been said, but you don't often have the opportunity to have the distinguished panel that we have before us, and so we're going to take about 30 minutes and talk a little bit about some public policy ideas. And one of the things I'd like to start with, and you heard each governor mention their activity level, and I'd like to talk a little bit about trade nationally and get their ideas on how national trade policies impact the state. As you all know, there are a significant amount of changes with regard to international trade, given our current executive branch in Washington. And those of you who've been watching the headlines know there's a lot of discussion about trade and a lot of revisiting of trade agreements. And so I would like to start with Governor Allen and ask him, does he think these discussions are moving us in the right direction? What are his observations? And ask each governor to sort of talk about these revisiting of some of the longstanding trade agreements, their thoughts on those trade agreements, and whether or not they're making Virginia stronger, making our country stronger, and what observations they have. They'll each take a couple of minutes on that, and then we'll talk a little bit about the role of states in trade. So Governor Allen, if you could chime in on that first.
Well, I think first of all, all of us agree that we ought to open up more markets. And I think the guiding principle of the Trump administration is the concept of reciprocity. We want a level playing field. If we have 5% tariffs on our products coming in to the U.S., they shouldn't have a 25% tariff on our products. I'm really glad that the what is now called USMCA, the trilateral agreement with Canada and Mexico and the U.S. I'm really happy that's been done. Every agreement ought to be reviewed every so often anyway, and I think that that's been improved. I'm glad that there's been a deal made with Europe. I think in the future there should be one with Britain when they leave the European Union, so to speak. And I'm glad, and I was always for the U.S.-Korea trade agreement, and that's been upgraded, and we have now more access into South Korea. China's the big one, and that's obviously we import more than we export into China. These gentlemen also brought up, we export a lot of agricultural products into China and so forth. But in China, that situation the reality is, and everyone said this, every administration, Democrat or Republican, is China cheats. They steal our intellectual property. They limit our access to their markets. They force the transfer of that information. So what I would hope to see is not a trade war. Trade wars don't help Virginia. They don't help the United States. More particularly, it doesn't help the competitiveness of the United States or our consumers. So if you could get a bilateral trade agreement with Russia, with China, one, you'd stop that intellectual property theft. You'd want to have a more level playing field and access for our products and our manufacturers and so forth into China. And the other key thing, and I think this is what's good in the new USMCA, is there's a mechanism for adjudicating disputes. So you don't end up with everyone just, we're going to put a 25% tariff or we're going to put such and such on it. Yeah. You want to have some way of making sure that the rules are enforced, and I think ultimately that is the goal. Now, the methods and the tactics of this president are unusual, but sometimes all the diplomacy in the world hasn't gotten China to change any of their policies, and so I am hopeful that and I don't like the tariffs and so forth, but that is a way of getting their attention. This is a big market. The United States is not weak here. We're not a 97-pound weakling in the world. We are the biggest market and the most lucrative market. The other great thing is the United States no longer has the highest taxes in the world on incorporated businesses. And we're now better than average. And our regulations are less. We have affordable energy, thanks to this boom in natural gas for manufacturing of chemicals fertilizers, plastics, tires, metals. The biggest cost is feedstock. And now with our affordable natural gas prices, that really helps the United States. So and then the other thing is the skills and the capable workforce folks. But the United States can compete with anyone around the world. And so all we want, I think, and we ought to be united as a country saying we want a level playing field and reciprocity in dealing with other countries, including China.
Thanks for your answer. I'll ask Governor McDonnell. Some of us are just referring to it as NAFTA 2.0. It seems to be the natural evolution. Following our panel, we'll have a break, and then the Deputy Ambassador from Canada is here and will be speaking to us shortly about the Canadians' view on this new agreement. But I would like for each of you to also respond to where you think we are, and are we headed in the right direction, and what observations do you have, Governor?
Well, I think Governor Allen summarized it pretty well. I mean, the policy of the U.S. ought to be not just free trade, but fair trade, free and fair trade. If it's a level playing field, then it's up to the U.S. to have good policies on taxes and regulations and international trade, and then let the states compete. I'll never forget the first time that right after I got elected governor, I went to Texas and had the mistake of having Governor Perry introduce me. And I remember he got up there and he goes, now I want y'all to know that Virginia's for lovers, but Texas is for business. And that's when I knew that there's really good competition between the governors of the states, and if the feds could just, we have a good playing field, and just have them stay out of the way, then we could really have a real advantage here in Virginia and the states to be able to compete in the marketplace of ideas and compete for jobs and business. So I think there are a couple things. One, NAFTA hurt us for a while. If you look at what happened to the economy in Southside Virginia, where we toured furniture manufacturing, textiles, along with some of the things that happened in tobacco, really over about a decade and a half, really decimated that area. I know we all put some focus in Southside Virginia in order to help to promote the economy down there. But federal policies can have a real detrimental effect on that. And so I was glad to see that with the current administration redoing the deal with Canada and Mexico to have something that's a little bit better for America. Secondly, was exactly right, the trade policy, the tax policies. You can go abroad and you'd find out the foreign countries and companies would find out that we had a 35% corporate tax rate in America with a 6% state tax rate, a total 41%. Didn't make it very attractive to want to be able to start an investment in America with that. And so we had this long-term flight of businesses from Virginia and other states to Latin America and other places, Asia, where the labor rates were such that we just couldn't compete because our standards of living here are so high. And so you've got to have common sense treaties and policies where it's fair. And I think maybe the methods might be questioned, but I think the end result of this revised trade agreement is going to be good for the United States in that area.
That's great. Governor McAuliffe, we talked about you being the most traveled governor to foreign countries in your time. I think in the last year I've heard you've traveled to a few states around around America. And I would be interested in knowing about what you're hearing. What are you hearing around the country as you've traveled to other states about the last year and a half or so, and some of these views of other states regarding trade and what your thoughts are on the trade agreements in place, changing, and moving forward?
Yeah. Well, first of all, NAFTA, as you understand, 80% of the original NAFTA is intact. The idea he redid NAFTA is a joke. And don't forget, Congress is the one who actually has to pass it. And that hasn't happened yet. But, you can rename it and do what you need to do. We're all in agreement. The internet did not exist when NAFTA came into place. Yeah. So, of course, it had to be redone. I agree with both governors. We got to look at every deal, continually upgrade and negotiate. We have a trade surplus with Canada. Yeah. Trump would have you believe we have a deficit. We didn't have a deficit. We had a surplus with Canada. But, facts never get in the way of this guy. And in fairness, I've known him for 20 years. In full disclosure, he gave me $25,000 when I ran for governor. But I negotiated with him a lot. I was chairman of the National Governors Association on immigration, on healthcare, on trade. I'd get an agreement with him, sign, go back, tell my governors. 24 hours later, he totally changed and go the other way with no rhyme or reason. But as I travel around, I was in Iowa last week, and it's a beautiful state, Iowa. I'll be in New Hampshire on Saturday. Beautiful state. But I'll tell you, in Iowa, I was there 2 weeks ago, and that was the day that the soybean crops were coming out of the field, the first day they started taking them out. And they're very concerned, Barry, because of the tariffs.
Right.
And I don't like the tariffs. As I say, I'm a big free trader, fair trade. I don't like the tariffs. If you go to Iowa today, the soybean farmers will tell you that 20%. So what happens is when they begin to take the soybeans out of the ground, that's when they go negotiate with the banks for next year's crop. 20% of the existing soybean farmers have already been told that they are not going to renew their line of credit solely because of the tariffs. So, listen, we got to have fair trade. I worry about our fight with China. China plays for 1,000 years. We play. Our CEOs and corporations have to go quarter to quarter with dividend reports. They will play for the long term. Could be very damaging to our farmers, our soybean farmers, our poultry and so forth are going to get hit. So there's a lot of concern, Barry, out there of how these tariffs will actually impact them. I talk a lot when I'm on the field about TPP, the Trans-Pacific Partnership. I disagree with Trump vehemently on it. I disagreed with Hillary vehemently, Bernie Sanders on it. I was for TPP. I led a bipartisan group of governors, Terry Branstad, the governor of Iowa, longest serving governor in U.S. history, and myself, Democrat, Republican. TPP was negotiated with 11 countries, and it was about where the banking would be done, centralized banking, also intellectual property, and how you deal with internet and technology. It was a long negotiated deal. America would have been a big winner on TPP, and Trump pulls us out. And I can tell you, those 11 countries, every single one of them, guess what? They have done a one-off deal with China. This TPP was to keep China out of the dominance. You know what they're doing in the South Sea. They're building new islands and defense issues. So this was a way to counter China, and the exact opposite has now happened. They've done a one-off with every country, and 60% of Virginia trade goes to those 11 countries. Guess who's out today? Virginia and America. And China now has done a deal with every single one of them. This is where politics ruins good policy. And it all became a presidential primary issue in 2016. And it's really unfortunate. And no offense to Governor Allen, and I like to say governor, but he was a senator, so I want to be careful. Congress does nothing. It is totally broken. They pass nothing. All they do is fight. And senators who are in the middle of trade, we all had to negotiate deals. Senators don't do that. We don't have deficits. We all got to have balanced budgets. We got to create jobs. And the Congress today is broken, and they're determining trade policy. Not one of them had negotiated a trade deal. And it's very, very unfortunate for this country. But TPP was a huge mistake for America.
Let me add something to Terry, just some balance, but also agreement. I agree. I was in the Senate. Governor's a much better position. Make more decisions in one morning than you do all week in the Senate that moves at the pace of a wounded sea slug that Bob and I had to eat, and Terry, I guess, as well. That's what sea cucumbers are, sea slugs. Cool, they're not alive. Still not tasty. The Trans-Pacific, that just got all tied up in politics. This issue of trade, this is perfect you're doing this. Those of us who are for free trade and realizing, and fair trade as well, as Bob said, all of us back in the 80s, 90s, and so forth, and it was mostly Republicans, but it was President Clinton who got the NAFTA deal done. And NAFTA ended up being a dirty word in Southside Virginia. NAFTA wasn't the problem. China was the problem, really. I'd like to see, and in fact, I look at all the T-shirts and shirts and caps and stuff you get during your years as governor. You can figure out when they're made in the USA, this is that time. It's made in Mexico with U.S. fabric, but assembled in Mexico, that was that time. I'm happy to see anything made in Canada, Mexico, U.S., Honduras, Taiwan, rather than China. But China has been the problem. And it's been politically, on the Democratic side and the Republican side, trade has become a dirty word, and people thinking America is being taken advantage of. They see the closing, as Bob said, of of textile facilities. I remember when Toltex shut down, it was after I was governor. It's worse than a natural disaster in Martinsville, losing thousands of jobs. After a natural disaster, you can actually build back up. But it wasn't because those people were lazy workers or malingerers or hardworking people. Generations had lived there. And so international trade, or NAFTA, became a dirty word. So I think it's important and incumbent on all of us here to tell our stories. If you're any business here that exports, raise your hand, please. Okay, you all need to tell your stories and have your employees tell that story, that you're your Virginia business. Undoubtedly, 80% of you all would be considered a small business. Regardless, these are jobs for Sally and Joe and Deshaun and whomever that works in your office, in your businesses. Tell that story. Let people in the counties in which you're located or cities know that. And because people need to understand that trade is beneficial to the United States. We want to open markets. We can compete and succeed with any other country in the world if we have, as I said, the right leadership and the right policies. And so trade needs to be, instead of a negative for Democrats and for Republicans, it needs to be, hey, wait a second, let's understand this really means something to the United States, because I think we're in the best position we've been in a long time because of our domestic tax and regulatory and energy policies to really be preeminent. And plus we have the rule of law here, which helps a great deal for investment.
In our final
And
minutes
I was in
together-
Iowa just yesterday.
You were in Iowa too.
I got at this time yesterday. I was in Iowa at a Ronald Reagan dinner. Probably a different type of crew than Terry's at.
I missed that one.
Yeah, you missed that one. And supporting Governor Kim Reynolds, who's a great firecracker. At any rate, the farmers there, and they are concerned. What Terry's saying is absolutely true. But they want to stick with this president. I've been up to North Dakota, not a key primary state, speaking to their greater North Dakota Chamber of Commerce, and they export about everything they produce or grow in North Dakota. And Iowa says they're number one, and they're all this, so forth. But I think a lot of the farmers are going to let this administration negotiate. I think they're going to give them some leeway. They don't like it. They're worried about it. It is disruptive, but the sense I'm getting from a lot of farmers that I hear from, and a network I'm involved in, and that's key. The farmers are going to be the key for this Trump administration, and I think they're going to let him run for a while and hope it all works out.
Let's bring it back to Virginia, because most of these companies are all headquartered in Virginia. A lot of them are small businesses, but there is a mixture here. During Governor McAuliffe's administration, our foundation at the Chamber did a study on the impact of exports during a 5-year period. So we looked at, from 2009 to 2014, how much, and think about the time period in America's economy and Virginia's economy. What did exports mean to Virginia from 2009 to 2014? And what we found was that 30% of the job growth during that time were directly tied to your companies. Directly to your companies. It was companies that were manufacturing products in Virginia and exporting in Virginia, and that those jobs that you created paid a significant amount more than the average job. So exports are critical, and I would like to ask Governor McDonnell, and by the way, I do remember you quoting that before the money committees when you were giving a presentation in one of your December updates, the importance of exports and job creation. I'll ask Governor McDonnell and the time we have remaining, each governor, to talk a little bit about how do states differentiate themselves, given the fact that we have a federal system that negotiates these national trade deals. How do states differentiate themselves? What should we be doing, Governor? And I'll ask you, Governor McDonnell, first, to differentiate ourselves. And to the extent you want to talk about, when you were governor, what are the features that we have that other states just don't have? Other states are going to talk about features that they have, but what is it that's really unique about Virginia that we can sell, and what is it we can improve as a state to differentiate ourselves in the role of states in trade? It's a broad question, but I'd love for you, Governor, to answer that, and we'll go through the rest of them.
Sure. Well, I want to say first for the record, I was in Chesapeake and Pungo yesterday. But I'm really glad Terry's helping to export soybeans to New Hampshire and Iowa. I really appreciate that. I think that's really great. we have so many natural competitive advantages, and I'll tick off the list. Much of this has already been said. One is the proximity to Washington, D.C. Everybody knows D.C. It's the power base. They know New York, L.A., and maybe a few other states. But if you can say we're the folks right south, and I did too, I pointed out all those airports are in Virginia, then they start to think, okay, well, you're basically a suburb of Washington. It's very, very powerful. Secondly is the education system. Our public higher education system is second to none. It truly is the gold standard. I remember so many places going. I was actually in China last year on another business trip, and people there wanted us to try to help a secondary school, like a boarding school in China at the K-12 level, and also how do we get better universities and have an American presence in the central part of the state. I was in Chengdu, China. We've done a lot of good work on the east coast of China with relationships, but not so much with the central places. So that American gold standard of higher education still is a great attractor. So many people from those foreign countries come here. They learn at American universities, and they go back and compete. So we need to obviously find some ways to keep them here. But being able to promote UVA and William & Mary and George Mason and VCU and all the great universities that are growing, that are well invested, that are focusing on high tech and all the entrepreneurial and innovative disciplines that there is, cybersecurity has been mentioned and things like that, is a great attractor for Virginia. Thirdly, I think Governor Allen mentioned this, our right to work laws. When you explain what that means in real terms, they may not know that term, but when you explain what that means, which is basically pure, the great freedom of the employer to do his or her business without a lot of interference by labor unions, it's great. Fourthly is, I think, our internal tax and regulatory climate in Virginia. I think most governors have done a lot to try to keep taxes in check, to be able to curtail regulations. That was a big focus that I had, Governor Allen had. So they know that they've got a lot more ability to, without government interference, to be able to do their job. Now, what can we do? What can we do? And also, I mean, the fact that we've got such a high tech base already, second only, I think, to California. The number of tech jobs per capita. We've got 830,000 veterans. Those people make a great trained workforce along with the universities. These are all terrific and great selling points. I did a little work on the transportation area. They always want to know, particularly if they're in a manufacturing or a goods business as opposed to services, what's your road networks like? What are your airports like? And if you can sell those kind of assets, we're as good as any state in the country. Now, we don't have the incentives, right, I think, to compete with some of the other states. I think the Governor Opportunity Fund is up a little bit. We've got some other programs that have been put in place, but we're never going to have the giveaways and the cash at the bottom line to be able to compete. So it's our intangibles, our business climate, and some of these other things, skilled workforce, proximity to D.C., the public and mass transit systems that we've got to give us a major strategic advantage over other states. I think, honestly, the chief executive of the state, along with leaders in the business community, going to other countries and able to promote Virginia is still really the best way to put us on the map.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would agree with all that. I think if you're trying to recruit businesses from overseas, I think our strategic location in the Mid-Atlantic, the ability to have a base in Virginia to reach the breadbasket of America, everything's within a day's drive. I think that clearly was one of our best selling points. You could get your goods anywhere you need to do. Great infrastructure to do it. We announced 2 years ago the Atlantic Gateway project, the building that was 18 miles of rail traffic. The biggest choke point in the east coast of the United States is the Virginia-D.C. border, the long bridge that we have up in D.C. That is where the double stacks all get in trouble. If you ride passenger Amtrak, as you know, CSX owns the rail line. So if you're behind a freight car, it's passenger, you're going to sit behind that freight car. So we did a thing last year and announced the Atlantic Gateway, building about 14 to 18 miles of new track so that the freight can move over, passenger can go by. We're extending the long bridge up so the double stacks. This will be an ultimate game changer for trade for Virginia, because we do compete against New Jersey and New York, but it's cheaper to come to Virginia, right, John? And we now, with this new Atlantic Gateway, you can bring your goods to Virginia. You don't have to go on up into New York. And that will probably be the single biggest thing that we have been able to do to increase our freight activity and cargo capacity Then with the port, obviously our huge asset, we will have the deepest port, the widest port to allow us, as I say, to have 2 lanes for the super tankers that will actually be coming in. And then, as Bob said, low taxes. We haven't changed our tax rate in 30 years. It's interesting. I actually, 2 years ago, proposed a corporate tax cut because North Carolina has dropped from dramatically. They've gone down 3 whole percentage points, and they're going to get down to like 3. I wanted, and there's a big difference when you're 6 versus 3 when you're negotiating to bring a business in. It was interesting, so I proposed to take ours down. You didn't have to match them, but to be more competitive. And it was amazing the Republican legislature defeated my bill to lower the corporate tax rate in the Commonwealth of Virginia. We're all going crazy, but I tried because I think it's important. We got to stay close because we do compete a lot with North Carolina. Yeah. And then finally, I think making Virginia open and welcoming. I cannot tell you how important. I had a lot of records. One of my records is I had the most vetoes of any governor in the history of the state, 120. I think I beat Jim Gilmore. He had 82, but what was interesting about Governor Gilmore, he vetoed. He had a Republican legislature. So he was vetoing his own party. I at least had the other side. But listen, I have to be honest with you folks, it's important. I had to beat back the most anti-women. We had horrible anti-women legislation in this state. Anti-LGBT, horrible. I vetoed every one of those bills. You cannot recruit a disruptive gig economy business to your state if you are putting walls up. Stay out of the discriminatory business. I went out to see 2 years ago a $1.6 billion project we did. One of the most prominent businessmen in America went out to his office, and the first question he asked me, he said, "Governor, why do you have an HB2 bill?"
You're going to go last.
I said, "Well, don't worry. Bob Marshall's crazy," who I used to tell Bob himself, who introduced the HB2 legislation. And I said, "They can't override my veto." But I came back and I talked to the caucus. And I said, "Folks, by the mere introduction of this kind of stuff, they can go to 49 other states. You got to stay out of this." I got CoStar to move to Richmond, 1,100. Average salary was $96,000. Out of North Carolina, their incentive package was twice North Carolina's, twice ours. We got them because of their HB2 bill. And, they lost all the sporting events. So my point is, at the end of the day, all the infrastructure is important. Make your state open and welcoming. You want to recruit. If you want to come to Virginia and create business and create jobs, we want you in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Virginia is for lovers.
All right. Let's ask Governor Allen to close us to talk a little bit about the unique features of Virginia and any role the state can play to help, and any suggestions and opportunities that we have to even grow and prosper more.
Well, let me say I agree with both governors on what they were saying here, including openness, and this country should be a land of opportunity for all, regardless of their race, religious beliefs, ethnicity, or gender or orientation, and that does matter. And I think Virginians have become to embrace that. Things change. As I said, you need to be willing to change, adapt, innovate, and improve. Remember what Virginia was founded as a commercial venture. And we welcomed glass blowers from Poland and steel makers from Germany. And we are always constantly striving, to quote Abraham Lincoln, to become a more perfect union and make sure this is a land of opportunity for all. Now, Virginia attributes for the state north on the eastern seaboard with a right to work law. We have the great ports. Those ports and connections by rail are really important. One of the decent things that was actually helpful when I was in the Senate, when they had earmarks, is making the tunnels higher for double stacking, because we had signed a port agreement with Columbus, Ohio, to get into that Midwest market, to get into Columbus to Chicago. So as Terry said, the ships can come, if they are getting to the manufacturers in Indiana and Ohio and so forth, come to Virginia rather than New York, New Jersey, and so forth. And so those connections do matter. Tax policies matter. The cost of doing business. Keep lawyers out of workers' compensation. Lawyers heal no one. That keeps our workers' comp rates lower. That matters to businesses. All these things. It's income taxes, corporate taxes, quality health care availability, and education is crucial. We invested, when I was governor, in the Smart Road at Virginia Tech. That has spawned so much investment into this. And we thought of for smart roads, it's also for smart cars, and now with the autonomous vehicle aspect, there's just tons of investment for that smart road at Tech. The VCU Engineering School is valuable. We created and funded the Prince William campus for George Mason University. They have world-class nanotechnology professors and doctors and scientists there. Nanotechnology is obviously in everything, from materials engineering to microelectronics to medicine and a variety of other things. So all of that's important, but I think that the biggest thing that I would say that Virginia needs to focus on, and we have the ability, and Bob mentioned our colleges and universities that are outstanding. The greatest asset for Virginia is obviously we have a great location, proximity to 2/3 of the population of the United States. We have great history, mostly great history. We have nice climate. We don't have glaciers. We don't have deserts, but we have everything else: beaches, mountains, valleys, rivers. The best asset are the people of Virginia. And so I think that the biggest challenge is to make sure you have the right economic policies, competitive, but it's not just colleges and universities. These semiconductor fabs, I'd ask those folks, I said, well, how did she start off? Did she go to Arizona State? Did she go to University of Texas? No, and this is a leader. And no, she had 2 years in a community college. Terry brought this up. You alluded to this. Certifications or apprenticeships, credentialing is the most important. And make sure, if you're a manufacturer or a business, invite people in from your communities to let them know what you're doing. Have your younger men and women working talk to young kids in schools to say, hey, this is cool. These are the jobs of the future. The Labor Department just put this out yesterday. There are 488,000 unfilled open manufacturing jobs in the United States right now. So people say, oh, it's all changing and these jobs won't be there in the future. Well, right now there's 488,000 job openings in manufacturing. And then you can multiply that for all the other businesses that are not involved in manufacturing. So the focus of this governor, present and future General Assemblies is to adapt, see where the puck is going. The reality is we need to make sure that the young men and women in Virginia are getting the education, the skills, the capabilities to seize these tremendous opportunities that are available in our blessed Virginia and our blessed United States of America. So focus on people and their skills and their education.
May I make one last brief comment? I know the light's flashing, but we never pay attention to those anyway. So,
I know.
And I'll say this. We've all talked about what happened during our term, but with a 1 4-year term as governor of Virginia, we are people in a big hurry. And so while that's something that's probably not going to change in the foreseeable future, I think what's important to note is that each of us sort of build on the work of the others. There's so much you can do in that 4 years and laying foundations, but the next governors do work to build on that, and that'll be the choice. Things that Terry did, Ralph is now enjoying some of the benefits, and he'll build that for his successor, and that's just the way it works. Jim benefited from some of the work that George did. And it leads me, I guess, to my final point, is we are a very divided nation. Our politics is tribal. It is ugly. It is vitriolic. It is too personal. It is hyper-partisan in Washington. But one thing I think everybody can agree on is that America really needs to continue to be not only a beacon of freedom, but also the beacon of economic opportunity for around the world. That's why people come here, legally and illegally, to be able to participate in the American dream. It's still alive. And so this issue of job creation, economic development is one that's evergreen. It's not partisan. I heard a delegate tell me on one of the trade missions and supporting some of the legislation we put forward, Governor's no red jobs or green or blue jobs, but there are green jobs and Virginia jobs, and that's what I want to be for. And I thought that was pretty profound. And this is one that people across parties can cut down the rhetoric and the vitriol and work together. And that's why for you, especially with one-term governors, help your governors. You get in there, you may not have experience. George and I had some experience in the legislature. Terry had experience in business. But I tell you, when you hit that desk and the ceremony's over and the buck stops at your desk, you got to move. and you need help from corporate citizens like you in order to make it work. So I'd encourage you, and all of our comments have settled in, it really depends so much on what you do to be able to advocate in the private sector in this great land of opportunity of Virginia, to work with your public sector people, help your governor to promote the great things of Virginia around the world.
Ladies and gentlemen, join me in thanking this panel and for their public service. Thank you all very much.
All right, buddy. All right, I'll see you in Pungo and Chesapeake.
Terry, thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Thank you for being here. Really do appreciate it.